Hi, this is Greg Johnson with Blue Book, and I'm joined today with Robert Gunther, who's Senior VP of Public Policy at United Fresh. And Robert, we had an important letter that went out, and it dealt with some of the produce industry's requests with regards to the stimulus package and how Pakka might be able to work into that. I wonder if you could just talk about what the progress has been and what you might expect the next week or two.
Thanks, Greg, for having me. Appreciate you, as always, kind of having these discussions. I think this is probably the second one we've got to do over the last few months. So I think how I would frame this is, you're right. Big thing happened 2 weeks ago. Congress passed the CARES Act, and as part of this $2 trillion program, stimulus package, so to speak, about $35 billion was dedicated to USDA activities. And as part of that activity, 9.5 was carved out, so to speak, to deal with COVID-19 pandemic outbreaks. And we, as fruit and vegetables, along with the livestock industry, small farms and farmers markets, were specifically mentioned as part of the groups that needed that part of that $9.5 billion. That led, to your point, to the letter that was sent Monday to USDA, where over 75 produce organizations across the country, representing state, local, commodity-specific groups, very robust group of organizations that represent the fruit and vegetable industry in this country, sent a letter to Secretary Perdue saying, we appreciate the support. Now let's roll up our sleeves and let's work together. And we identified a few things we wanted to work on with them. Part of it is, and most importantly, is kind of addressing the current immediate impact related to COVID-19 that has impacted our industry, where almost 40% of the industry kind of shut down almost literally overnight through the food service that serves restaurants. Those folks who grow produce for food service, kind of that entire supply chain was almost, again, it basically just shut down and created this backlog of challenges and significant challenges within those different sectors in different ways. So the challenge we had was, how do you address that in one kind of program, or one kind of program, or one kind of thing, or kind of project at USDA. That subsequent letter led to the groups who were supportive of this effort to really spend the last 3 or 4 days rolling up our sleeves, kind of figure out what would work best, what would make sure that that supply chain is brought back to some stability. It's not necessarily going to make them whole, I would say, so to speak, but it really does, in terms of trying to put some infusion of equity into the process and create some stability in that entire supply chain. So from growers all the way up through food service, and even at some level, even at the restaurant level, quite frankly, because the way we're approaching this.
It's really trying to keep companies from going out of business, isn't that
exactly.
Right?
Exactly, because I think you mentioned Pakka. If you can imagine, our estimates are in the, at this point, based on what happened over that 2 to 3 week period when schools and restaurants closed down and the supply chain shut down for those folks in the fresh produce industry who serve those customers, almost $5 billion, around $5 billion in damages. Just that critical moment just stopped happening. We're also estimating about 1 billion losses a week in that space that are now ongoing. And I think that, yes, trying to create something that can address that is really critical at this point in time.
Are the people you're meeting with in government aware of the urgency to get this stuff moving very quickly? Because I could certainly see if a company waits a week or two to get any help, they'd close the doors, and then that trickles down.
Yeah, and I think that that's an important part of this. We have been in constant contact. This started even before the letter. This started before kind of anything happening in terms of, as soon as this crisis happened and we kind of understood potentially the impact this is going to have, we have been in contact with Capitol Hill, with Department of Agriculture, and other parts of the administration that have been helpful in a lot of different ways. I will say they have been open to calls and conference calls and Zooms like we're doing here over the weekends. You know, they've been very accessible to kind of understand what the situation is on the ground and trying to give them that perspective of what's happening. I'll go back to Pakka a little bit too, because I wanted to finish my thought there. You know, Pakka is a very important tool for our industry. And I think the goal here, as we look forward into kind of developing and finalizing this proposal, and then moving it into USDA to start working with them to adopt this proposal and implement it, is to make sure we don't get to a point where the whole system seizes up, where there's bankruptcies, where there are Pakka claims across, multiple, different entities across the supply chain. And the goal here is to really, as you pointed out, create a program, create that insert of federal resources that will help stabilize the industry so that we don't have to get into that situation where we're seeing multiple bankruptcies, in the hundreds, tens of hundreds, or even thousands, quite frankly.
Yeah, some of my sources told me one of the keys is keeping liquidity in the market. And are you finding that the government people understand that message and how important that is to keep the supply chains moving and not get it all gummed up with bankruptcies and collections and all that?
Yeah, we have focused a lot on that to try to get them to understand how the marketplace works in fresh, and how the credit kind of system works, and providing credit to your customers and then being paid back down the supply chain. So we've worked very hard to try to get them to better understand that process. The good thing about it is we have Pakka in the USDA system. So the folks who run Pakka, the folks at Agriculture Marketing Service in that section, they know the industry really well, and they have a good sense to talk to the people above them in the political different positions, to kind of make sure they understand that this was the way the marketplace works. This is how, product flows through the system. This is how payments are made. The other part that we're working on, and we're focusing on with the administration and USDA in particular, is how we can get product moving through the federal nutrition programs, for instance. So while schools are shut down, schools are still serving curbside pickups for their families and children. Food banks are in desperate need of product. So working with them also to kind of be a pull-through operation that allows produce to continue to work through their supply chain, through their distribution center system, and utilizing some of the logistical operations that we have in the industry to help deliver fresh produce to those most in need.
So would this be mainly for produce companies that already had established relationships in these channels, or would it also be for companies who are now looking for new channels because they have all this product and their normal sources can't go anywhere?
Great question, Greg. And my answer would be the latter. So certainly those who are currently in the supply chain and currently understand how the system works related to kind of institutional programs, related to schools and food banks, they are already there. They're going to, certainly people are going to be leaning on them, and the USDA will be leaning on them. But it also provides this opportunity. One of the things we are pushing USDA and focusing USDA on is vendor flexibility. So new vendors, as you mentioned, who may not be part of the current program, creating a vendor's streamlined approach during this emergency crisis to approve these vendors in a way that allows additional opportunities for them to, again, move product, keep people employed, keep their trucks running. Almost, someone has mentioned it to me last week, keeping that engine oiled, not necessarily trying to take advantage of a situation, but it's really keeping the engine oiled and moving until the entire country gets in somewhat more of a stable position and back to a more normal business operation that they knew before all this happened in February and March, really.
Okay, well, I think that's a good update, and we'll go ahead and end this video now, and hopefully check in with you later in the week and see some of the progress, and hopefully we have good information to report that companies in the produce industry can find these new outlets through some of these packages.
Great. Well, thank you, Greg. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done. We're kind of halfway there. I think we got Congress to pay attention to us. The industry is very united behind helping the industry and get back on their feet. And now we got to make sure USDA can implement these things that we're pushing in a very effective and efficient, and as you mentioned, a fast way. because we need that help immediately.